Imagine waking up one morning, opening your eyes, and realizing the world is gone. No colors, no faces, no sunlight, just darkness. And the most terrifying part, it didn't happen because of an accident. And the most terrifying part, it didn't happen because of an accident. It didn't happen because of old age. It happened because of something you might already have in your home, in your routine, maybe even in your hands right now. Every year, thousands of people lose their vision permanente because of a silent poison they never suspected. As an ophthalmologist, I've sat across from patients who ask me one heartbreaking question. Doctor, will I ever see again? And sometimes the answer is no, not because we lack technology, not because medicine failed, but because the damage was already done. Tonight, I want to reveal something most people never hear. Until I want to reveal something most people never hear. Until it's too late. There are 5 hidden dangers quietly destroying eyesight around the world. And the tragedy is, almost all of them are preventable. Let's uncover them before they steal another person's vision. Imagine holding a clear liquid in a small glass. It looks harmless, it smells like alcohol, nothing about it seems dangerous. But hidden inside that liquid could be a silent poison capable of stealing one of the most precious senses you have, your sight. This poison is called methanol. And what makes it so terrifying is not just its toxicity, but how easily it disguises itself as something ordinary. Methanol is an industrial alcohol used in products like solvents, antifreeze, fuels, and sometimes illegally produced drinks. To the naked eye, it looks almost identical to tefo alcohol people drink. Most people cannot tell the difference. The smell is similar, the appearance is the same. But once methanol enters the body, something devastating. But once methanol enters the body, something devastating begins to happen. Inside your system, methanol is converted into 2 extremely dangerous substances, formaldehyde and formic acid. These chemicals begin attacking the nervous system, and one of their most vulnerable targets is the optic nerve, the delicate cable that carries visual information from your eyes to your brain. Think of the optic nerve as a highway of light signals. Every face you recognize, every color you admire, every detail you see travels through that nerve. When formic acid begins to damage it, the highway slowly collapses. Patients often describe the first symptoms in a way that sounds almost harmless. Doctor, my vision feels blurry. It's like there's fog everywhere. Lights look strange. But within hours, that fog thickens. Colors fade. Shadows creep into the edges of vision. And then suddenly, the world disappears into darkness. One of the most heart-wrenching realities about methanol poisoning is that, by the time symptoms appear, the damage is often already severe. The optic nerve does not regenerate easily. Once its fiber die, restoring sight becomes nearly impossible. Once it, even earth, yellows. There have been tragic cases around the world where people unknowingly consumed alcohol contaminated with methanol. In some outbreaks, hospitals suddenly received dozens of patients within the same night. Many of them arrived frightened, confused, holding their heads, complaining that they could barely see. Doctors rushed to treat them, administering antidotes and emergency care. Butante la noche, but even with aggressive drapery, many patients never recovered their vision. One young man in his early 30s walked into a hospital after drinking what he believed was ordinary alcohol, purchased from unregulated sources. At first, he thought he had a bad hangover. Then the room began to blur. By the time he reached the emergency department, he could barely recognize the faces around him. Within 2 days, it was permanente la noche. Las afueran mentelis. What makes stories like this so painful is how preventable they are. Methanol poisoning often occur because of counterfeit alcohol, poorly regulated products, industrial chemicals, stored improperly, or homemade substances that people assume are safe. The danger hides behind familiarity. When something looks normal, we trust it. When something looks normal, we trust it. When something smells familiar, we believe it is safe. But some poisons do not announce themselves with warning labels or dramatic symptoms. They operate quietly, attacking the body before we even realize what has happened. And the eyes, delicate and irreplaceable, are among the first victims. Sight connects us to the world in ways we rarely pause to appreciate. It allows us to recognize our loved ones, navigate our surroundings, beauty in countless forms. Losing it in a matter of hours, because of a hidden chemical, is a tragedy no one should have to face. Understanding this danger is not about creating fear. It is about awareness, because awareness is often the thin line that separates safety from irreversible loss. Look around you for a moment and think about how many times a day your eyes are drawn to a glowing screen, a phone lighting up with a notification, a laptop waiting for another email, a tablet playing one more video before sleep. These devices have become so woven into our daily lives that we rarely question how much time we spend staring into them. Now imagine your eyes as living tissue that was designed for something very different. For thousands of years, human vision evolved to observe natural light, shifting landscapes, distant horizons, and faces across a room. The eyes constantly adjusted between far and near, between shade and sunlight, between movement and stillness. But in the modern world, something has changed dramatically. Millions of people now spend 12, sometimes even 14 hours, sometimes even a day sometimes, focusing on bright screens, only a few inches away from their faces. The eyes remain locked in the same position, blinking less, straining more, and absorbing intense artificial light, long after the sun has disappeared. At first, the effects seem minor. Your eyes feel dry. Maybe you rub them more often. Sometimes letters on the screen blur for a few seconds. Many people assume this is simply part of working hard or studying late. But what seems like a small irritation can slowly become something much deeper. When you stare at a screen for long periods, your blink rate drops significantly. Normally, a healthy person blinks about 15 times per minute. But when focusing on a screen, that number can drop to 5 or 6 blinks per minute. Each blink spreads protective tears across the eye surface. When blinking decreases, the surface of the eyes can cause which are irritation, inflammation, and long-term discomfort. At the same time, the retina at the back of the eye is constantly processing intense blue light emitted by digital screens. While research continues to evolve, scientists know that excessive exposure, combined with poor sleep patterns, increases oxidative stress within retinal cells. Over time, this stress may contribute to conditions that weaken vision. And then there is the issue of sleep, something many people overlook completely. Scrolling through a phone in a dark room before bedtime may feel relaxing, but the blue light signals the brain to stay awake. It suppresses melatonin, the hormone responsible for sleep. When sleep cycles are disrupted night after night, the eyes lose critical time needed for repair and recovery. I once met a university student who came to the clinic complaining of constant headaches and blurred vision. He was only 26 years old, energetic, ambitious, and convinced his eyes were perfectly healthy. But when we discussed his daily routine, the truth became clear. He spent most of his day studying on a laptop. In the evening, he relaxed by watching shows on a tablet. And late at night, lying in bed with the lights off, he scrolled through his phone for hours. When we calculated his screen exposure, it added up to nearly 14 hours every single day. During his examination, we noticed early signs of digital eye strain and retinal stress that normally appear in much older patients. He looked at me with disbelief and said something I hear very often. I thought eye problems only happen when people get old, but the reality is that modern habits are rewriting that story. The eyes are resilient, but they are not indestructible. They need rest. They need blinking. They need distance. They need moments where they can look up from the glowing rectangle and reconnect with the real world. The irony of our digital age that the tools designed to connect us to information, entertainment, and each other can quietly stand us from something essential. The natural premier, our eyes depend on to stay healthy. Protecting your sight does not mean abandoning technology. It simply means remembering that your eyes were never meant to live inside a screen all day. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do for them is the simplest. Pause, look away, and allow your vision to breathe again. There is a condition in medicine that many eye specialists speak about with deep concern, not because it is rare, but because it is incredibly quiet. It moves slowly, patiently, almost invisibly through a person's life. By the time it reveals itself, the damage is often already severe. Doctors often call it the thief of sight, not because it attacks suddenly, but because it steals vision piece by piece. So gradually many people never notice it happening. This condition is glaucoma. Inside every healthy eye, a clear fluid constantly circulates. It nourishes the eye and maintains a delicate balance of pressure. Normally, this fluid drains through tiny channels that function like microscopic plumbing systems. But in glaucoma, something goes wrong with that drainage process. The fluid begins to build up and pressure inside the eye slowly rises. Now imagine placing gentle pressure on a delicate cable made of thousands of dots, on a delicate cable made of thousands of tiny fibers. The cable is the optic nerve, the pathway that ties visual signals from the eye to the brain. When pressure increases inside the eye, it slowly begins to damage those fragile nerve fibers. But it is what makes glaucoma so dangerous. In its early stages, there is usually no pain, no redness, no obvious warning sign. Vision in the center may remain perfectly clear while the edges slowly begin to fade. Prior vision, the ability to see things to the side without turning your head, starts disappearing silently. The brain adapts remarkably well, filling in gaps so that the person doesn't immediately realize something that immediately. People drive, read, work, and care for their families without noticing the small pieces of vision quietly vanishing from the edges of their world. Then one day something strange happens. A person bumps into a piece of furniture that seemed to appear from nowhere. They struggle to notice someone approaching from the side. Driving at night feels more difficult than before. By the time these symptoms appear, a significant portion of the optic nerve may already be damaged. I remember a patient who came to the clinic in his early 50s. He was a hard-working father who had spent most of his life providing for his family. When he sat down across from me, he seemed calm, even slightly confused, yet about why his wife insisted to get his eyes checked. She says I miss things when she walks into the room, he explained with a small smile. During the examination, we ran a visual field test that measured how wide a person's vision really is. As the result appeared on the screen, the room grew quiet. Large areas of his peripheral vision were already gone. When I gently explained the diagnosis, his expression changed from curiosity to disbelief. But, doctor, he said, I can still see clearly in front of me. And he was right. The center of his vision remained sharp, but the world around the center had already begun to collapse inward. Glaucoma does not destroy vision all at once. It shrinks the world slowly, like a tunnel closing tighter and tighter over time. Eventualite e fantrite. That tunnel becomes smaller and smaller until even central vision fades into darkness. What makes this story particular is that glaucoma can often be managed if detected early. Simple eye exams can measure eye pressure, examine the optic nerve and the dentate nerve, and identify warning signs long before major vision loss occurs. Yet millions of people around the world live with glaucoma without knowing it. They feel thin, they see well enough. And because there is no pain urging them to seek help, the disease continues its quiet work in the background. Vision is so deeply woven into our daily life that we rarely imagine it disappearing from the edges inward. But glaucoma reminds us that not all dangers announce themselves loudly. Some move silently patient, waiting for the moment when we finally realize something important has already been taken away. There is something deeply personal about the human eye. It is delicate, sensitive, and incredibly complex. Because of this, people naturally trust anything designed to go into their eyes. If a bottle is labeled eye drops, most of us assume it must be safe. After all, who would sell something harmful for such a fragile organ? But the reality is more complicated, and sometimes deeply unsettling. In recent years, doctors around the world have seen a growing number of serious eye infections, linked to contaminated or poorly manufactured eye infections, linked to contaminated or poorly manufactured eye drops. These products were meant to relieve the dryness, reduce redness, or soothe irritation. Instead, in some cases, they introduce dangerous bacteria directly onto the surface of the eye. To understand why this is so risky, imagine the front of your eye as a perfect clear window. That window, called the cornea, must remain smooth and transparent interporally. Torria puerto, could they enter properly. Even a small scratch or infection on the surface can quickly interfere with vision. Now imagine placing bacteria onto the window. Certain aggression microbes can begin multiplying rapidly, especially in more moist environments like the eye. When this happens, they can cause what doctors call a corneal ulcer, a painful open sore on the surface of the eye. At first, the symptom may seem minor. A person might notice redness, irritation, or the sensation that something is stuck in the eye. Some people assume it's just the dryness or fatigue and continue using the same drops that caused the problem. But within days, the situation can become much more serious. Vision begins to blur. Light becomes painful. The eye may water constantly. In severe cases, the infection starts damaging the corneal tissue itself, creating scars that block light from entering clearly. I once treated a patient who had purchased inexpensive eye drops online. He simply wanted relief from dry, irritated eyes. After long hours of work, the product looked professional. The packaging seemed legitimate, and the price was much lower than pharmacy brands. For a few days, everything seemed fine. Then the redness began. Soon after, I noticed sharp pain and sensitivity to light. By the time I came to the clinic, the infection had already created a visible ulcer on his cornea. The treatment required strong antibiotics, frequent monitoring, and weeks of careful care. Even after the infection healed, a scar remained on the cornea that permanently affected the clarity of his vision. All of this began with something as small and seemingly harmless as a drop of liquid. The challenge today is that many products are sold online or through unregulated markets, where quality control may not be strict. Some bottles may not be properly sterilized during manufacturing. Others may become contaminated after opening if they are stored incorrectly, or used for too long. And because the eye is so sensitive, it doesn't take much to cause serious damage. The irony is that people often turn to eye drops because they care about their eyes. They want relief, they want comfort, they want clearer vision, But when the source of that relief is not carefully regulated or medically approved, the very thing meant to help can become the beginning of a much larger problem. The eyes do not have the same defenses as other parts of the body. A contaminated product placed directly into the eye bypasses many of the natural protective barriers the body normally relies on. That is why ophthalmologists emphasize something simple but extremely important. Be cautious about what you place in your eyes. Use trusted products. Pay attention to expiration dates. Avoid using someone else's drops. And never ignore persistent redness, pain, or blurred vision. The eyes allow us to experience the world in vivid detail, but they also require respect and care. Sometimes protecting your vision begins with recognizing that even the smallest drop of liquid carries enormous responsibility. Deep inside the back of your eye lies a thin layer of tissue that works harder than almost any other part of your body. It is called the retina, and its job is extraordinary. Every ray of light that enters your eye is captured by this delicate layer and transformed con l'elettrico layer and transformed into electrical signals that your brain interprets as images. Every face you recognize, every word you read, every color you admire passes through the retina first. What many people don't realize is that this tiny layer of tissue demands an enormous amount of oxygen and nutrients to function properly. In fact, the retina is one of the most metabolically active tissues in the entire human body. It requires a constant supply of healthy blood flow to survive. Anything that interferes with that supply can slowly poison it. One of the most powerful and destructive threats to the retina is something millions of people expose themselves to every single day: cigarette smoke. At first glance, smoking may seem like a problem for the lungs or the heart. That is what most warnings emphasize. But the chemicals inside tobacco smoke travel far beyond the respiratories. Tobacco's far beyond the respiratoria, far beyond the feature. They circulate throughout the entire body, including the delicate blood vessels that nourish the eyes. Inside cigarette smoke are thousands of toxic compounds. Many of these chemicals increase oxidative stress, damage blood vessel walls, and reduce the amount of oxygen reaching vital tissues. Over time, these effects begin to harm the tiny vessels responsible for feeding the retina. When those vessels weaken or narrow, the retina begins to suffer. The damage often targets a particular important region known as the macula. The macula is responsible for central vision, the sharp, detailed vision or sharp, detailed vision you use to read, recognize faces, and see fine details clearly. Without a healthy macula, the center of your visual world begins to fade. This condition is CNET, known as macular degeneration. For many patients, the first sign is subtle. Words on a page may appear slightly distorted. Straight lines may look wavy. A small, blurry patch may appear in the center of vision, while everything around it still seems normal. But as the disease progresses, that patch can grow darker and larger. Faces become difficult to recognize. Reading becomes exhausting. Everyday tasks that once felt simple begin to feel overwhelming. I remember meeting a patient who had spent decades working as a photographer, capturing momentos, light, and emotion through a lens was not just his career, it was his passion. He understood beauty in a way many people never experience. When I first noticed a dark spot in the center of his vision, I thought his camera lens was dirty. But cleaning the lens did nothing. The spot remained. Eventually, I came for an examination, and the tests revealed that his macula had been severely damaged. Years of smoking had contributed to the development of advanced macular degeneration. I sat quietly for a long moment after hearing the diagnosis. Then I said something that stayed with me. If I had known smoking could take away the very thing I love seeing most, I would have stopped long ago. That moment captured a truth many people overlook. We often think of smoking as a distant risk, something that might cause illness many years in the future. But the damage it creates can slowly spread to places we never expected, including the eyes that allow us to witness life itself. Studies show that smokers are several times more likely to develop age-related macular degeneration compared to non-smokers. The toxins gradually weaken the retina's ability to protect itself from stress and aging. And once the central vision is gone, restoring it becomes incredibly difficult. The tragedy is that many people only learn about this connection after the damage has already begun. Yet the eyes are quietly reflecting every choice made over time. Every exposure, every habit affects the bloodstream, supplying the retina. Vision allows us to experience the details that make life meaningful. The smile of someone we love, the colors of a sunset, the simple ability to read a message or recognize a familiar face. Protecting that ability often begins not with complicated treatments, but with the daily decisions we make about how we care for our bodies and the fragile systems that keep our sight alive. As we reach the end of this conversation, I want you to pause for a moment and think about something simple. Right now, you can see. You can see the words in front of you. You can see the faces of people around you. You can see the faces of people around you. You can look outside and watch the sky change colors as the day moves forward. These are things we experience so naturally that we rarely stop to consider how extraordinary they truly are. Vision feels permanent until the day it isn't. Throughout this discussion, we uncover dangers that many people never think about. A hidden chemical that can silently destroy the optic nerve. Everyday screen habits that slowly exhaust the eyes. A disease that steals vision key. Products that can damage the surface of the eye. And lifestyle choices that slowly poison the delicate retina. None of these threats usually arrive dramatically. They don't always announce themselves with loud warnings or sudden pain. Most of the time, they work quietly, gradually, almost invisibly. That is what makes them so dangerous. But there is also something incredibly powerful in understanding. Because knowledge creates awareness, and awareness creates protection. Protecting your eyesight does not require extraordinary measures. It often begins with small decisions made consistently, over time, choosing trusted products, giving your eyes rest from screens, paying attention to changes in your vision, visiting an eye specialist regularly, even when you feel perfectly fine, taking care of the body that nourishes the eyes. These simple actions may seem small today, but they can mean everything years from now. Day time, as an ophthalmologist, one of the most difficult moments is sitting across from someone who asks a question no doctor wants to answer. Will I be able to see again? Sometimes the answer is yes. Modern medicine can do remarkable things. But sometimes the answer is silence, followed by difficult truth. And that is why conversations like this matter. Because the goal is not simply to treat blindness. The goal is to prevent it. Your eyes are not just organs. They are the gateway through which you experience life itself. They allow you to witness milestones, recognize loved ones, read stories, travel the world, and absorb the beauty that surrounds you every single day. So tonight I want you to leave with one simple thought. Sight is not something to take for granted. It is something to protect. The choices you make today, no matter how small they seem, can determine whether your eyes continue to see the world clearly for decades to come. And when you open your eyes tomorrow morning and light fills the room, remember something powerful. That light is a gift, and protecting it is one of the most important decisions you will ever make. Pero,